Welcome, welcome, welcome to the 24-hour, not unstoppable Camaraderie Fundraiser. I'm Russ Johns, and I just wanted to welcome you to the 24-hour session here because we're going to this is the fourth hour of the first of 24 hours and of the TCRMI 24-hour fundraiser to bring awareness to our veterans who struggle with PTSD and losing hope. I'm Russ Johns, your host for this hour. I'm going to be guiding moving the levers in the background and creating a few opportunities for you to donate and learn more about how to donate. And then also, I want to share a little bit of a backstory with you in my association with veterans and why this matters to me. Because my father, who recently passed away, he was almost 93, and he served in the Korean War. And phenomenal experience for him. And he shared so many times that he actually had a good experience in the military. And he served his country. He came back, and then he found my mom, and they got married, and they were married for almost 63 years before he passed. And the other side of the equation is I had an uncle that was in the military, a veteran that attempted to get some assistance and support, wasn't able to, and ended up committing suicide. And it was a terrible circumstance. And I was actually the last person to talk to him while he was living. And there was no indication that this was going to happen. And I've also lost a son to suicide. And it's important that we take care of our mental health. And so many veterans are challenged by PTSD, mental health issues, some of the ongoing challenges that are everyday occurrences that many of us don't even think about. They don't even consider. And so I want to make sure that you take the time, take the moment, and learn about what we're doing here for the next 24 hours or the next 20 hours, since this is hour 4. And I just want to make sure that you think about what you can do to make it matter, to do something to contribute, because this event runs until 6 p.m. Eastern time on Saturday, tomorrow, October 8th. And we're running this, and it brings awareness to programs like TCRMI that has been in the collaborations, and they've made organizations, and they help veterans gain hope while living with PTSD. And I've got a couple of guests on here that I'll be introducing you to, but I want to make sure that you think about how you can donate, because by doing so, I'll put the links in the ticker. You can go to tiny URL /hope for vets. And that's Hope for Vets, or donate by check. You can make it out to the Camaraderie Rescue Mission and mail it to Greg Bicknell, USAF, CM Sergeant, retired. And I'll put this up in the notes. 1532 Cordgrass Lake, Florida, 33813. We appreciate all your donations and really appreciate everything that you can do to support these causes. And let's not allow anybody to slip through the cracks. Let's do what we can to make sure that everything that we're doing is going to be assisting and supporting the veterans that are out there, the people that help make us the country we are and the safety we have. And I just really want to make sure that you understand how important this is and how valuable you are. And I really value your attention and support for this cause. And now I want to bring on a couple of guests we have here. We have Dr. Jay Royster and Mark Andersen, and they are going to be talking about this very same subject. And I want to make sure that we have an opportunity to have a lively conversation and talk about why this is important and why it's necessary, and some of the things that we need to think about that we may not even consider as we have in the past. So, Dr. Royster, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Welcome, welcome, welcome to the 24-hour fundraiser, and doing what we can to support our veteran community and mental health and build awareness in this area. So, Dr. Royster, I know that you're probably you're involved in this. You've been doing this for a while. So share a little backstory about who you are and how you're involved in the veteran community and PTSD and helping provide some relief from some individuals.
So I'm an Air Force veteran, and during my time on active duty, my best friend died by suicide, and I found her. That was very challenging. There have been significant traumatic events that have occurred in my life after that and before that. And I decided that it was in my best interest to help heal myself and figure out what worked for me. I ended up getting trained in about 25 different therapeutic modalities, and I found all kinds of resources along the way. I also developed a protocol called the Trauma Recovery Intervention Protocol. I have worked with over 3,000 people and over 1,000 first responders and veterans. Hi, Dorothy. Love you, lady. And I am on the board of a nonprofit organization called Project Vet Relief. And Project Vet Relief is it's the nonprofit arm of the American Legion. And what they do is they work with strategic partners that really focus on suicide prevention, because we are now up to 44 today, and one is too many.
One is too many. I have to agree with you.
So I've had several suicides in my immediate family and those close to me, and it's just absolutely unacceptable. And so I network, and through Greg from Camaraderie Rescue Mission, he decided to snag me up and take me down to see Mr. Mark Andersen. And he owns St. Petersburg Salt Floats, right? Salt Works?
St. Pete Salt Works, yes.
St. Pete Salt Works. And we knew we were going to do this podcast, and he invited me on to help him do this podcast. And when he did, I'm like, well, I need to know what floating in salt is all about. So this morning I went in and I decided to, do the backstroke and the butterfly and all that in one of his tanks. And it is an amazing reset. I felt, I'm pretty sure I passed out a few times, not really sure. I know the music woke me up. There's music and lights, and it's very therapeutic. It's very meditative. It's very zen. So he has this whole center, and it's just, I'll let him tell you more on how it came to be for him, but I am forever grateful. And I think I bought some gift cards for some people. So
was that your first time?
Yes, it was my first time. I knew that it was beneficial. I had heard, through the grapevine that it was just great. Of course, Greg, he goes on and on about it. Mm-hmm. So I figured, well, some of my, therapy clients might really enjoy this. And I don't really live in the area. I live about an hour and a half away from him.
Oh, wow.
So I knew I was going to be down here this weekend. So I just kind of called him and said, hey, can I go? And he's like, absolutely. And then I brought in another client that I worked with at the traumatic brain injury clinic that I work at, so that he could experience it because he lives right down the road. So Mark got to meet him.
That's fantastic. So you made connections, you got to float. I've been floating for a while now.
I will be floating for a while now. I will tell you that. He's like, I have a podcast at 9:00. I'm like, I don't know if I'm gonna make it, dude. Like, I'm good today.
Nice. I love it.
So tell us about your experience. Was it relaxing? Did you come away from it feeling like you were refreshed and you had a reset?
I honestly, if I smoked pot, I probably would understand it a little bit better, but I don't.
You-
So
When you
I
came
was a
out,
little nervous. The only thing I heard is about, the infection in the ears, right? I was really worried about my ears. But when Mark gave me the tour, he's like, there's this neck thing you can wear. It keeps your head out of the water. And here's some earplugs, and you take a shower before you get in, you take a shower after. And then I came out and I don't know if I knew where I was. It was pretty great.
you look like you just smoked a doobie. Your eyes were half closed. You're slunched down. So yeah,
I promise you I did not.
I know you didn't. We call that.
I'm a medical director for CISM in some police departments. Like I did not smoke.
No, I know you. I'm saying that you were very relaxed. So
Yes.
you came out, and that's what it's all about. That's how you're supposed to come out after an hour removed from the world.
Oh,
And
wonderful.
that's exactly what you look like.
What you
So
got
tell
in
us
store?
tell us a little bit more about it, Mark, because and thank you again for being here, both of you, Dr. Royster, Mark. We're really appreciative of your time and effort, and I know it's late for you guys in Florida, so I want to dive in a little bit deeper for those that may not be aware of what floating is and some of the things that are misconceptions or may not be fully understood, because it sounds like you had a great experience, Dr. Royster.
I did. And I remember when I went in with Greg and we did the first tour, and I'm like, what? Dude, it looks like a bathtub with 10 inches of water. Like, what's the point? Mm-hmm. I had no idea. I'd never heard of anything like that. It was very new to me.
It'll be fun to kind of get into some of the science behind it. And so I'm excited to have you have the experience and then hear about it instead of kind of priming your float with all of the things. So this will be fun. I can get into it. So, at St. Pete Saltworks, we have 3 float rooms, and each room is pretty much your own oasis. You have everything that you need in there to have a float experience. And they're typically 1 hour. It's funny. I have more people asking for longer floats than shorter floats. So, that's
like
really
90 minutes. Do you go in intervals, a half hour?
Yeah. I've had a lot of people do 2-hour floats. So anything more than an hour, it's pretty much your room for 3 hours, and you can kind of get out whenever you want. And most people don't want to leave. And that's amazing. And that's letting you know that, once you get comfortable in that environment, removed from all the external stimulants from the outside world to your nervous system, that's when you start getting these really cool synchronistic effects of removing gravity, touch, light, sound. That's a lot of inputs from the world to your nervous system. So a lot happens kind of getting you to that theta state there. But kind of more about the float session there. So, like you shower before and after, like Dr. Royster said, and then you literally float on 1,000 pounds of Epsom salt. There's enough salt to float you like a cork.
Yeah.
And then the water is skin receptor neutral. So after a while, you don't know if you're floating in water or floating through space. And those are 2 big inputs from the world you're not usually able to remove unless you go back to the womb, which is not very easy to do. So, and then the room is soundproofed and lightproof. So you can leave the fiber optic lights up in the ceiling. You can leave the light on under the tub. There's some music in the beginning and then middle or at the end there. But you can turn off the lights and successfully remove all the inputs from the world. And that's really what it's all about. And it revolves around a clinically studied practice called REST, which is the acronym for Restricted Environmental Stimulation Therapy. And they've been studying that for over 50 years now. This was initially created by a gentleman by the name of Dr. John Lilly. And at the time, he worked at the National Institute for Mental Health. And he was studying what would happen to the nervous system if you removed it from the environment. A lot of people thought you would just kind of, didn't know what would happen. You start plugging people in and kind of see what the brain looks like in that state. And that's when starting to say, hey, there's a lot going on in that reduction of inputs from the world. So
that's crazy.
Yeah.
I will tell you, I got out and I was like, I only need a half an hour. And then I looked at the time and it was like 10:52.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Did you find yourself falling asleep?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm fairly certain I passed out at least twice.
Perfect. That means you made it to that theta state. That's that state like where your body's asleep and your brain is awake, kind of known as that theta state. So we're really kind of holding people in that state there. And as you know, that's a great space for, for getting creative, for kind of processing. And that's why I'm really excited about working with veterans and just giving them a space to really hyper focus on what they're learning. If they're going to some talk therapy, floating pairs well with lots of different modalities, and it's really a place to either prepare for or process after. And that's what I love about, floating in combination with other modalities. So it's something I've had so much positive feedback from, and it's been really great getting some firsthand feedback from a lot of veterans and all walks of life. First responders. We're right across the street from a hospital, so get a lot of healthcare workers in. Yeah. So yeah, that's why we're here.
Well, I now I want to tie it together. I want to tie it together to actually talk about how floating and getting out of the noisy environment that we're in and just stopping the noise for a moment can actually help in the PTSD and some of the the emotions that we hold on to and some of the things that we're attached to in our minds, and how that ties in together to actually create a solution or helps resolve some issues with the veterans or anybody that has PTSD trauma.
Yeah, so I'll speak a little bit, and I'd love to hear your take as well, Dr. Royster. But yeah, I mean, floating in, we're really helping pull people out of that fight or flight response. I think before 2020, everyone's stress cup was already pretty full. After everything that's happened over the last couple of years, that stress cup is kind of overflowing now, and a lot of people are dealing with new stresses that they don't know how to kind of manage. But a lot of that's just caused by your environment. So I think it's pretty amazing what happens when you're able to kind of pull yourself out of that for a little bit and kind of lower those inputs, those receivers, and kind of let your body go back to a nice default mode network and kind of re-look at things from a different perspective, even if it's for a short amount of time.
So just taking the time to unplug, for lack of a better term in my mind, is one of the ways that we can actually help us reset this whole process. Would that be a way of describing it?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah. I float all the time. Obviously I opened a float center because I wanted to be able to float all the time. So I've been experimenting with longer floats and different, modalities. If it's some breath work in there, different cognitive things, if it's like counting backwards by twos, something to kind of focus the brain so it doesn't wander all over the place. Cause that's the biggest thing. A lot of people, it's kind of hard. The monkey brain starts going, and
right.
You have to learn to silence that a little bit so you can have a chance to look between the thoughts, But like everything else, it kind of does take a little bit of practice. Or it's a fancy nap, you don't go over there and overthink it and chop in there. And
a fancy nap. I like that.
Yeah.
Well, I think being in 1,000 pounds of salt, like your body doesn't have. What I found is I'm a disabled veteran. So what I found is some of the aches and pains that I normally endure in a regular bathtub, like those didn't exist. So it allowed me to rest have a little bit more quality rest. And it enabled me to shut down for that 52 minutes.
Love it. Yeah, that's huge.
So like my shoulder, I'm having a hard time. I have back issues. I have neck issues. I got disability for my thumb. I didn't even know it was a thing. Apparently it is. So when I'm laying in there and my arms are outstretched and my shoulders are back and my back is, there's not so much pressure because gravity is not a thing in the float. I realized that my body just kind of could reset. And I had an hour where I didn't feel that pain.
I can totally relate to that because and I've broken every bone in my body almost, and every limb, at least on my body, ribs, arms, legs, skull fracture. I fell 3 stories and shattered my elbow and my wrist. And
Wow.
And so when I think of pain, I think I'm grateful for the pain because it proves that I have lived. However,
it's nice. That's what we say. We got pain because we ain't dead yet. Yes, sir.
Yeah, we ain't dead yet. And I'm going to continue to thrive and stay alive. However, it's not that I haven't had some very dark moments in my life and some challenging times where, I needed help. I needed to check out and I needed to get some assistance. And I think everybody, if they're honest, we have those moments and we might not go as far or to the point of no return, but we do need ways that we can actually get some relief, I think is the best way to describe it for me anyway.
Not to interrupt you, Russ, but they're saying that they're having technical challenges. At least Dorothy and Greg are saying that it's not live.
It's not live.
That's what they both said.
Okay, well, let's see. It says I'm live. View on LinkedIn. Let me copy this. Let's see what we can do. And if you're also, this show is streaming on YouTube and Facebook as well. So let me see if I can't see what the problem is. But go ahead and while I'm checking this out, please maybe take a moment and talk about some of the things that you're working on, Dr. Royster, because this is still being recorded, and we can actually move it off to the recording and push it out there as well. So
cool.
It says something is wrong with my feed. So, okay. Beautiful.
Yeah, Greg and Dorothy, you're texting me, and I'm like, okay, you're texting the most technologically challenged person in this group. Like, I paid somebody to set up a 1-page website, and I cannot figure out how to do stuff on there. Okay, so like, I can fix a human, I can disconnect trauma, I can make you sleep like a baby.
Yes.
Don't ask me to do things online. Don't.
All right. Let me
well, we can keep going.
We got this. Keep going. Let's just keep it going and make sure we have it. All right.
So Mark, how long you been doing this?
So it started as a note in a BlackBerry about 12 years ago. And that was actually when I was working in a classified environment as a civilian contractor for the DoD, making maps. And when you're making maps, you can kind of put on autopilot and start listening to podcasts. And one of them was Joe Rogan. So I blame Joe Rogan for creating a float center. He was very eloquently able to speak of it and how he utilized it for elevating his mind and as a fighter and working with that, using it for muscle memory and all this stuff was fascinating to me. Mm-hmm. But then also, being around veterans coming to and from tours and seeing some coming back a lot different from when they left and some not coming back. So I kept seeing floating in its simplicity as a way to really help people quickly get a little break from the overstimulation, from the thoughts. And the more research I did into the cognitive benefits of floating, the more I was like, yes. and then no one would build one. So I had to go deep into how to create a business. I went from making maps, a 9-to-5 at a government job, gravy job, just sitting there and, doing very important work, mind you, to let's build a float center. And here we are, we've been open for about 4 or 5 years now. I floated over 10,000 people. Still, worked with a lot of different veteran organizations. Some of them actually have floats that are paid for by their programs, one of which is Neuro Community Care for TBI programs. So, it's been great. And I really, moving forward, it's all about kind of being here and helping with the research component to have this covered by insurance. So I want people to not have to pay for this if it's in need. And I wish I could pay people to float, but that's not a good business model. So, eventually we'll get to the point to where, people that are in need have it available to them and quickly.
It's really interesting to me. How did you first discover floating at all, Mark?
Yeah. So, I'd heard about it. Similar to Dr. Royster, people are like, oh yeah, this is really cool. And then, never really got around to it. And then, like I said, Joe Rogan put it in my head from a podcast. And probably about 2010, my wife was pregnant, and I have a 12-year-old now. So about 12, 13 years ago. And I'd heard about it. I wrote it down. I even wrote down, like, someday I'm going to open up a float center. I hadn't even floated yet. And then I had that first float, and it was like, whoa, this is pretty cool. The second one, I got salt in my eyes, wasn't that great. Then that third float, my drive home from my third float is what I was like, wait, it slowed down the way I was responding to my environment. It kind of just slowed, and everything was a little bit brighter. And I was kind of driving through a naturey kind of area, and I was like, I just noticed I was reacting differently and slower to my environment. And I was like, whoa, so all I did was float for an hour. I didn't do anything. I didn't take anything. So that's when I went deep into the research and trying to figure out why more people aren't doing this.
And what's really cool is in the float area, there's a water bottle. So if you get salt in your eyes,
yes, squirt.
Yeah.
It was a rookie mistake for me, and that'll take you out of it. But yeah, you're right.
Guilty.
Yep. And that's after that couple floats, you'll kind of know, and that's why that first float and that third float are very different. You're able to go a little deeper for a little longer, and you learn some of the things from that first float.
So you're trying to say I need to come back 2 more times. I see how you are.
Yes, I got you.
3 or 4 at least.
It's research. It's research. For a good cause.
It's really
so when
amazing,
I met Mark,
though.
we were talking about some cool things that you can do with the brain and stuff. So I kind of want him to share about his ideas and what he's got on the checklist I should say on the credit card next.
So, before, I call it Corona break because it sounds better. But before Corona started, we had partnered with a brain mapping company. And our goal was really to make a QEEG brain mapping as affordable as we can, to have people get some baseline data so they always have something to compare it to. And we were pretty successful in creating, we can take 1 million pictures of your brain, make a 3D model of it, show where it's overactive and underactive, really neat data and available for anyone to come in and do that. And I'm fascinated by the brain and brain mapping. I spent 15 years making maps. My goal is always to kind of use that background for brain mapping at some capacity and kind of gamify it. That's kind of some things I'm excited about doing. But I really want to show people what their brain looks like visually before and after a float. Because we are kind of changing your reaction to your environment. We're pulling you out of it, and it's really neat to kind of show people what that looks like. There's already a lot of data out there. They put one of these at a brain research institute, and they've been plugging people in to kind of collect data, and it's been pretty fascinating to kind of see that data come out, and that's just getting started. And I'm going to be in part of that process as well for the Float Tank Association and the Float Research Collective. So that's why I'm excited to be working with Greg and with Dr. Royster and just really kind of combining all of these, different modalities. And floating just is one of the options, or one of the tools in people's toolboxes. And I want to help people, show them what their brain looks like before and after, and, or even show them what their brain looks like after Dr. Royster runs a trip protocol on them, because I'm fascinated by that as well. And I really want to be an advocate for what you're doing there. So yeah, it takes a village, and I'm just one of the villagers.
Well, I could see 2 sides of that working together very, very closely, because the brain is a fascinating part of us, and it never ceases to amaze I'm sure the experts, even yourself, just when you see scans and things come out, and you're thinking, that's interesting. I mean, that would be my response. I don't know how you respond to or react to some of these readings.
A QEEG machine is an electroencephalogram, and what it does is it's like a swimmer's cap, and it has electrodes all over it for different parts of the brain.
Uh-huh.
And what it does is it reads all the rays, all the waves, theta, beta, high beta, low beta, gamma, all those different kinds of brain waves. And what happens is if there's a plus or a minus, and then they show like an area of the brain that's colored, right?
Yeah.
And so if it's +2, it's hot red. And then if it's -2, it's like a cool blue. And what we want is we want it to get it to all green, because green means go, right? So what we do is using neurofeedback, you can train the brain while this thing is on. We have you like watch cats race and all kinds of weird stuff, put fish in the bowl. It's pretty amazing. But what it does is it trains the brain so that the brain can heal itself. And what it does is it creates new neural pathways and neuroplasticity and all this fun, different, really funky words that nobody understands but Dr. Duttori, and you'll find out at 6 a.m. tomorrow because he'll go off left. But anyways, so with him, yes. So I learned a lot about neurofeedback, and I took a class and I learned how to use the machines and all that. But I think if Mark has one of those, and it'd be wonderful if he got a donation, just saying, but if not, he definitely needs some customers so that he can afford one of these fancy machines, because they are not cheap. No. They're, used is like 40 grand. Like, it's not cheap.
Wow.
Yeah. So the company we partnered with, they unfortunately didn't make it through the pandemic, but I'm still working with the software that he used, which was really good. The hardware that actually had that you're speaking of is made by Momo, the people that make the Ferrari stuff. So really neat company, and you can, Dr. Royster, you can probably speak a little bit more of the Q part of EEG, the QEEG, because really the data that they're using, it's all quantifiable data. So they're taking that brain scan and comparing it to other similar demographic brains, so you can really kind of see where you fall on that, where it's overactive and underactive compared to what they would consider a normal brain, or a brain that's acting the way it should, that's finds its good default mode network and able to settle down after an event, and like you said, that it's very plastic. We're able to remold these things with some techniques, and that fascinates me. And I think it's going to help people. And I've always had this idea of gamification of people's brains. If we can kind of get people excited about, hey, if you go through all of these different things, your brain's going to look different from the first one. So you get that baseline data, show people what it's going to look like after, working with everyone under Greg's umbrella of beautiful people. I'd love to be a part of that. So that's some of my my moonshots, if you will.
So when I met Mark, the reason I met him is because I dragged Greg down to get his brain mapped, so that we knew what deficits and what positive, what negative, right? And he didn't break the machine. We were very grateful. Thank you, Greg, for not
good
breaking
to know
EEG. But
way to go, Greg.
Basically, quantifiable means numbers, right? So you have qualitative, which is the quality of something, and then quantitative is the numbers behind it. But basically, quantifying the EEG activity in different brain areas, the activity of these areas and their interaction can be shown by the numbers. So there's a list of numbers, right? And they make no sense to anybody who's not studied neurofeedback, right? You have to take this class so that you can read the numbers. Yeah. But then they have the cool, like I was talking about before, the color-coded parts. And it's just like a weird-looking skull. It looks a little bit like Shrek because there's ears on it. And then you have the green and the blue and the dark blue and the light blue and the hot red. And it kind of gives us a a gauge. It's like, okay, theta needs to be improved. So what we do is we type in these lovely little numbers like 0.75 or this or that. I'm not going to get too far into it, but
Sure.
at the end of the day, what we want is we want them to collectively come to center.
Yes.
So these numbers you type in, does that change the frequency or change the way the frequencies are being collected in the brain?
Well, what's cool is the one EEG that we have at the TBI clinic, right? And like I said, we'll talk about this in the morning, but he has one that, and he uses a service called Brain Avatar. And their computers actually process all the data and they kick it back and say, this is what you need to work on. But when we were in training, the 5 days of training, they taught us how to plug in the numbers and what they all meant so that we knew everything behind it, even though Brain Avatar handles it for us now.
Yeah, it's still good to know the working parts and stuff. But no, that's really cool. I love that. And yeah,
Somebody says, I'm not even there to defend myself.
Greg, we all know you couldn't edit it. It's okay.
And I just want to remind everybody that you can go donate at tinyurl.com/hope4vets. And this is some of the work that's being done in the background and some of the efforts and the energy that is going into this 24-hour fundraiser. And we just want to make sure that you have the opportunity to support your community, the vets around you, and those that may not even be aware they need assistance and support. However, this brings awareness to the community. This brings awareness to everyone that can actually reach out to tinyurl.com, Hope for Vets, and see what we're doing, see what's going on for this 24-hour fundraiser. And I just want to thank Dr. Royster and Mark here and all of the efforts and energy that they got going on in their world to help this cause and for both serving. Thank you so much for both your efforts. I appreciate that. So
we're happy to be here. This is exciting, and it's important work that everyone's doing here. And I'm excited for some of these other podcasts too. I've taken a lot of notes and got a lot of new connections.
There is a lot going on, and it's unfortunate that for some reason the LinkedIn connection went down, but I went ahead and shared the Facebook, the Twitter, and the YouTube links with the team. So hopefully they can share that out and post that and make sure that people get that information so we can come in. And if nothing else, we'll go ahead and I will replay this out and share it with anybody and everybody that I'm able to, and then share it with the team and make sure that they have this information going forward. Sure. But the other thing I want to ask is, Dr. Royster, you have some techniques that you have developed.
Correct.
Talk a little bit about that and find, because there's a lot of things in this space that people may not be aware of or even claim to understand. However, I think it's important that people, get some sort of information that they can say, well, I want to learn more about that.
Oh, so I had significant trauma. So when you go to the VA, they give you a post-traumatic stress disorder assessment. And one of the assessments they use is called the PSSI-5. And it scores you from a 0 to 80. So when I went in, I got a score of 78, which means I was struggling every day, all day long. I was sleeping every other day. So I went back after my doctorate. I got my master's in counseling because, doctor, heal thyself, right?
Right.
I was seeing everybody that was not a trauma therapist. I was on a lot of medications. And I had a dear friend. His name is Norman, and Greg knows him pretty well. He's actually serving in Djibouti right now as a contractor to the Air Force. So he wanted to go play Army, go Norm. But he's a licensed mental counselor in Florida. He's a licensed professional counselor in Virginia, same as I. And he's also a licensed counselor in his home state of Ohio. So what he does is he does a lot of really, really brainy stuff, neuroplasticity, and he's just all about the brain. Top brain, middle brain, bottom brain. Like when you talk to him, that's all he talks about. So he basically told me I was messed up, and he dragged me around the country to get fixed. And I got certified in a whole bunch of different therapeutic modalities, and one actually worked, which was called the Reconsolidation of Traumatic Memories. It's one under neuro-linguistic programming. So EMDR, accelerated resolution therapy, and the reconsolidation of traumatic memories, all of those were trained under the Special Forces guys from NLP. So they learned how language can affect behavior. So listening to someone, when something resonates with you, it shifts your thought process. And they got really good at it. Not to mention, they added Andersen, who created hypnosis, into that mix. So there's a lot of big creators of therapeutic modalities that trained under NLP and kind of went their own way. What I did is mine is derivative work of evidence-based RTM. So RTM is a 90-minute protocol, and you tell the story, you go through the process, and you tell the story again. And you can immediately see, not immediately, but 90 minutes later, you can see the shift, right? Well, everybody is instant gratification. So I had to figure out how to do this differently. And after working with about 20
I want it now.
people, right. Now. Well, the other thing for me was, why should it take me 12 weeks to heal from something it took 4 seconds to happen? That
That's a great
blew my
question.
mind. I couldn't figure that out. I'm like, okay, well, if the brain could absorb this and not process it, because the amygdala, our fight, flight, freeze, or fold, is like a Brita filter. And if it's all full, right, it's just you can't get any information through it. So when you go to sleep at night and you hit REM sleep, which is rapid eye movement time during the sleep, which is typically in an 8 hours, you do maybe 40, maybe 50 minutes. That's where you do all your dreaming, because the information, the 2 million megabytes of data we obtain during the day get processed during that time. Ooh, Greg said that Norm will be on at 2 in the morning. Awesome. Okay. So he's brilliant. You'll love him. But he's the reason I did this. Anyway, so as I worked with people, I took in the advice, I took in the information, and they're like, I don't want to tell my story. And I'm like, okay, don't. I don't really want to hear about burning bodies anyway.
Right.
That's okay with me. I don't need no vicarious trauma. I've had enough. So I took that out. And then some of the other things weren't working for people. So because there's 7 billion people on the planet, you have to find out what works for Mark. What works for Mark may not work for Russ. What works for Russ may not work for Tim. What works for Tim may not work for Greg, so on and so forth, right? So we have to figure out what pieces are going to work best for you. And I found something that takes about 10 minutes. You can work with multiple traumas, and I don't know anything, and it's wonderful. Because I can keep you really far away from it. What I also learned is the more you tell the story, the more re-traumatized you become. And with everyone you're sharing the story with, they become traumatized on some level.
Yep. Wow.
Interesting.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah. And every time, your body reacts to any of these events when they happen again, as if it's happening again, your body doesn't have.
You're remembering the memory of the traumatic event. You're not remembering the original trauma. So it adds on to it. The other thing is Norm will share this too at 2 a.m. He loves to talk about this, right? The amygdala.
I might ask to be on that podcast.
He's amazing. I'm going to connect you with him anyway, but he's about 7 hours ahead of us. So the amygdala is connected to the 10th cranial nerve. The 10th cranial nerve is connected to the vagus nerve, and the vagus nerve runs through our entire body. So anytime we experience fight, flight, freeze, or fold situations, the vagus nerve will expand. And when it does, we get our throats close up, tightness in our chest. That's why a lot of EMDR, they ask you, where do you feel it in the body, right? So that they can disconnect it. And what they do is they do hand motions or light bars. And what that does is it creates new neural pathways. I know I'm getting really brainy. I'm sorry, but I'm really excited.
Well, no, this is good stuff because there are some things that you have to dive in a little deeper in order to connect the dots in reverse. It's like just the event alone, we don't know how we process it. Just like you said, Mark has maybe some trauma that needs to be managed in one way. I might have some trauma that needs to be managed in another way. And the fact that you're explaining a couple of different processes and procedures that people can use to reduce or eliminate trauma, or, you know, adjust the way we're seeing it, I think is important for people to really manage and maintain at least a sliver of hope, because that's what happens is when you completely lose hope. That's why we have 44 suicides a day,
right?
Is because we lose hope. It's
right.
like,
hope
this is, I want to just get rid of the pain. I don't want to be here anymore. I'm helping no one with anything. And I need to make a difference. I need to make it matter. And I'm stuck. I can't get out of it. So
well, like we all could be standing on a street corner in St. Petersburg on the corner where Mark's building is, and we see this nasty car accident. Well, I used to be a first responder. So, I was a surgical technician in the military. I'm going to head out. I'm going to go see what's up. I'm also a medical director of CISM. So blood and guts, gored, none of that bothers me. But Mark might have nightmares.
Right.
Because he doesn't have any control over that situation. He's exposed to a new situation that is negatively affecting him. And it also could trigger some other things that happen, like when he was in high school, one of the kids got into an accident and something happened to it. Right.
Any of those
that in.
Yeah. Those events will stick with you. And you don't know, like you said, they get stuck in that Brita filter.
Yep.
Right. And and Dr. Royster, I think I heard you mention your goal is to be able to have people train on this. So, when they get back to, the police station or the fire station or the EMT, they're able to work with their partners to be able to kind of to use these techniques. Is that correct?
So, yes. So what the end goal is
the moonshot. It's called a moonshot.
Yeah, exactly. I'm one person, right? And I might have something pretty cool that works with, a lot of people, and that's all wonderful and great and all that. But I am one person. So what we did is we sat down, and I sat down with somebody who is not as therapeutically educated as I am. So we had to change some of the language because I was getting pretty cerebral, and he's like, no, like, I don't even know what this means. Right. So we sat down and we kind of broke this down so that not saying that first responders are slow, but they may not know some of the, hey, cognitive dissonance. And they'd be
that's not their wheelhouse.
Right. So I had to break it down, and I had to make it simple and make it streamlined so that these individuals can navigate this script. So
I had never thought about that because I also was a first responder in EMT. And so a lot of things don't bother me.
Right.
However, you don't know what is subconsciously still planted there that may come back and, create a reaction in the future.
Well, infantry, they're trained to do these certain things by rote, and then they happen, and then they come back, and there's this thing called moral injury, nasty little bug, because you're doing things that your country has told you to do, not asked you, told you to do. You've been trained to do the things you were told and ordered to do.
Yeah.
But in your personal belief system, as you developed in your younger age, thou shalt not kill.
Yeah.
Right. So you have this moral injury because you're going against your set beliefs.
True.
So that's also very challenging. And that's another part of PTSD that we just don't talk about.
Yeah.
So there's 3 parts to that. There's combat stress, right? There's over there 145 degree heat. You got a 100-pound A bag on your back. Like, you got to do all these wonderful little things that you were trained to do. But it's 100 degrees hotter than where you were stationed, so you have to adapt. And then the food sucks, and you're eating out of plastic bags, and it's not great. MREs are not good. I don't care what anybody says. Like, I was in the Air Force. I only had them once, but that's not the point.
You still know the difference between a sit-down meal and a MRE, huh?
Oh, we had flavored pancake syrup. I'm just saying. Like, you choose which branch of service you want to be in.
Fancy.
Yeah, I really think that if we step back, there's a lot that we don't know about the brain. I'm assuming, I'm thinking like
Well,
there's still a lot to
95%
learn.
is the subconscious.
Say that again.
Studying that, the certain parts like the emotions and the long-term memory and where that stuff goes. But as far as the stuff because we only use 10% of our brain. So 5% is the consciousness. We use all of it, right? Racing thoughts, intrusive thoughts. We got all these things going on, but the subconscious is 95% of our brain. We only use 5% of it.
Yeah.
Well,
and that's not very measurable. You can't see that on a graph, right? Are you familiar with heart math?
Me or Russ?
Oh, anybody?
Yes, I'm very familiar.
Yeah.
No,
that's another,
share it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll give my version of it now. You can have the doctor's version of it, which would be fun. I love this. This is cool.
I'm not certified in it. I have a colleague that's going through the certification, and he absolutely loves it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's another, So it's really, it's HRV, and it's looking at kind of the space between your heartbeats. So you have your heartbeat, and then you have the space between the heartbeat, and that's very precise measurement. And I guess you could find out a lot from that small measurement there. So you're able to really kind of see when you're using your heart to make a decision versus your brain, if you will. And kind of the practice that I've kind of learned and always try and still struggle with is it's a sliding scale of it's always running away. But if you kind of learn some heart-centered thought experiments that you feel versus that feel good, if you will, and you know how to activate those and get back to that, and the heart rate monitor or the HRV or heart math monitor will kind of show you when that's kind of those happy thoughts are running the show versus the other ones. So yeah, that's my version of it.
So what can you add to that?
Different patterns of the heart activity have different effects on your thoughts and behaviors. So the faster your heart goes, the faster your brain goes. The slower your heart goes, the more information you can process. So there is a nonprofit that is part of our strategic partnership called Shield of Faith Missions, and they use that. They give their warriors, their veterans, they're in Wesley Chapel. They do a whole person wellness thing in like 3 days.
What?
It's pretty fast. And yes, Mark, I will connect you to Dr. Friedman.
My notes are getting long.
Yeah.
Keep going.
So he's having a Tampa social tomorrow night that I have to go to, but he uses heart math, and he brought that in so that people would be able to, he educates the warriors on how to use it. And he has you use it during the retreat, so to speak. It's not really retreat. It's like 13 hours a day, and it's great. But I mean, you're moving and shaking.
Yeah.
There's a lot to get done, but it's very cool because it's a whole person program, but it's only in 3 days.
Is there a connection between the heart and the brain? I mean, in terms
absolutely. So that's the thing. When we, I'll go sideways. You got to keep me focused. It's 10 o'clock at night, man. So when like I said, when our heart beats faster, our thoughts are more intense and quicker, and we have less time to process that information. Whereas our heartbeat is slower and we're calm. That's why meditation is so beneficial. And so many people, they do the breathe deep slowly, and they do the hypnosis, right? So I'm not going to hypnotize you guys, but the point is that you see, Greg says Dr. Friedman rocks. See, he even knows who he is. Yeah. So he's been, SOF Missions has been around for about 11 years, not to pop another nonprofit, but we're all connected because we're here to serve people who put on a uniform to serve a higher purpose than themselves. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, we want everybody to get better, and we don't want anybody to check out.
Yes. Yeah.
He said he slept at a Holiday Inn last night. See, this is why we love this crew. Come on, folks. If you can learn more, go to the tinyurl.com, Hope for Vets. /
And
Hope
that's
for
the
Vets.
thing, you know, I talk to the senior enlisted airman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff pretty regularly, CZ Lopez. And the reason I'm throwing him out there is because he's the highest enlisted person in the military. And the most profound thing he said to me is in our first phone call, he said, the vets, as they transition, they lose their hope and purpose for life. And I said, well, dude, I got about 24 programs that'll reinvigorate somebody.
Yes.
If you like to jump on, climb on rocks, I got one for that. If you want to go to a retreat, I got one for that. If you want to go to one and you're worried about your bills being paid, I got one in Palm Beach Gardens. Like, let's go. Like, I'm working so hard to find all different kind of niches. You want to shoot off a horse? Like, we can do that. Right?
I heard that there was 270,000 military personnel exiting the military every year,
yes,
on average. And I have to believe that, you know, there are programs out there, a lot of programs, and the challenge that we run into on a regular basis, from what I understand, is connecting the right people with the right program to get the best results.
Because
and
when people are suffering and you want to take a vet fishing and they don't want to go fishing, but yet the other guy wants to go fishing, you know, they don't want to go and they're like, oh, I quit. And that's what happens.
Yeah. And that's not what needs to happen.
No.
What needs to happen is we need to continue to do outreach. We need to continue to make sure that there are programs available and educate everyone around us, even if you're not a vet, even if you're not, you don't know a vet, you know people that know people. So let's continue to share this information out and make sure that people have resources to get the assistance and support they need. The last thing we need is see, another one end his life because they didn't feel like they had the results or the resources available to them.
Right.
And I think that's a tragedy we can avoid. And
I mean,
we
if
need
you're
to work
hungry,
together.
we got vet organizations to do that. If you're homeless, we got vet organizations that do that. If you're horny, I can't help you, but we'll help. We'll do what we can. Okay. But the point is like Camaraderie Rescue Mission is made it Heroes, Badges, and Warriors, right? They've made it their mission to really focus on connecting, supporting, and sustaining that individual because we care about everyone. There's transitional trauma. I got a guy who spent 25 years in the military and he's really struggling. He's like, what do I do now?
Yeah.
And I'm like, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as far as floating goes, I mean, I'm not advocating for my float center. I'm advocating for all the float centers around the world, around the United States. If you're interested, I'll be your advocate for learning about it. But find a float center near you and jump in there for an hour or try it 3 times if you want, or just talk to the float center staff. They're very educated with working with veterans. Every float center I know has a good amount of veterans that come in, so that people know how best to give people that first experience and to kind of educate them on how to utilize it. But it's very quickly able to give people 1 hour. It's an adult timeout, and who doesn't need that, right?
We all need an adult timeout once in a while. So I want to make sure that we have an opportunity to share, not only the tiny URL, Hope for Vets, and the camaraderie, all of the information that we have here. And we'll continue to share that out the next 24 hours. Coming up in the next one, we'll have, the 24-hour TCRMI 24-hour fundraiser. We're going to go until 6 p.m. tomorrow, October 8th. And so share this out, share this in your network, share it with your community. Let's get the word out and make sure that we have an opportunity to actually get involved and engaged in this. And, LinkedIn, I dropped a feed on the LinkedIn feed. It was up early. And then, but YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and, we're sharing this information out on multiple platforms, multiple hours with different hosts, different topics. And I just really encourage everybody to join in and help us out.
Share. You can save a life.
Share.
You can save a life.
And save a life. Absolutely. And I really appreciate both of you joining us. Dr. Royster, this has been a tremendous opportunity to learn a little bit more about what you're doing, how you're helping, and the value and benefits you bring to the community. And Mark as well, with the Float Center and some of the things that you've discovered over the last number of years in the floating and how that helps and how it applies to people that need a little bit of quiet in their life. I think it's really important that we understand what's available to us. So thank you so much both for being here. And with that, I just want to wrap this up. And if you have any last words, Mark, do you want to share anything out with everybody?
Nah, go float yourself.
Go float yourself.
Have fun, guys. It was great. Thanks, Greg, for the opportunity. Dr. Royster, always a pleasure. And I want to do a podcast with you. Many of them. I love it.
I can see that
I'm
happening
on here 3 more times. So
yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Dr. Royster, any last words for the community you want to share out?
Donate.
Donate.
Right? Find,
Hit that button.
We are here to serve. We are here because we've struggled ourselves. We are here to help them find the hope and purpose that they need. I know once I disconnect some negative emotions from traumatic events, it motivates people. They want to get trained. They want to help others. So help them find their hope and their purpose.
Yes.
Help us raise the funds to connect some of these. Oh, Greg wants me to pop. Dude, we don't have that kind of time. I'll go with Blue Guardian Network that helps. They do life with police officers. They do life with veterans have turned police officers. It's a pretty profound organization. We have Paint 22 in Tampa here that paints with vets, and they do lots of different things. SOF Missions, Shield of Faith Missions, Liberty OVE is one of the organizations that I work with that uses TRIP to kind of get trainings done and things like that. I'm trying to think of all of them. We got National Veteran Resource that travels around the world, and she kind of shares hope and gets involved in the communities that we can't get to because she's got an RV, which is pretty cool because she can get in the little dinky towns that we might not be able to reach. They may not have Wi-Fi. I don't know. We got some homeless vet organizations. There's just so many. One of them is Fort Freedom out in Blue Palm Beach Gardens, and what he does is pretty amazing. He does a whole person 90-day wellness program, but they also are raising funds to help the veteran pay the bills at home so that they can focus on the program, which is pretty cool. We also have a traumatic brain injury clinic at Undersea Oxygen Clinic in Tampa. And I'm sure I forgot some, but I'll remember them by tomorrow morning, the next time I do a podcast. Hopefully.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much.
Love it.
I'm humbled.
Thank you.
And happy to accommodate.
Reach out to the American Legion too. So
Yes.
That's another thing. They do a lot of different things that financially other organizations can't do. They raise a lot of money. And like I said, the Project Vet Relief, you can donate. Share the wealth if you have some. Mega Millions is up to 410 million. Get out there, buy your tickets so you can donate, right?
There you go.
Fantastic. Well, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you for jumping on. Thank you for connecting and learning a little bit more about what we can do to help. So thank you everyone. Go to the next hour, go to the schedule and learn a little bit more about how we can help our vets. All right.
Bye guys. Thank you.
Take care.